Hey, it's Patricia Murphy. It's Monday. This is Seattle Now. The oil train derailment in Custer, Washington last month could have been a lot worse.
Attention, Sam 20, train derailment, 7,500 blocks Portal Way. The train is on fire.
But thanks to a swift emergency response and some luck, nobody was hurt, and an environmental disaster was averted. We'll get the story from KUOW investigative reporter John Ryan in a minute. First, let's get you caught up. The contagious new COVID strain that's been spreading across the UK has made its way to Western Washington. On Saturday, health officials said they found 2 cases of the B117 variant in Snohomish County. They said then there are likely more cases out there, and they were right. Sunday, Pierce County confirmed its first case. The city is responding to a call from downtown business groups to do more to stop the property damage and vandalism that's been happening at some recent protests. SPD Chief Adrian Diaz said over the weekend that the department will be making more arrests. The city attorney's office is reportedly also on board to step up prosecutions. Seattle Times reports that SPD has made about 600 protest-related arrests since last spring. And Tacoma's city council holds a special meeting today after a police officer responding to a street racing call on Saturday drove his SUV into a crowd of people. The video is all over social media. It shows a police vehicle attempting to back up before stopping, then accelerating, throwing several people to the ground and driving over at least one. 2 people were sent to the hospital. A spokesperson for Tacoma PD says the officer, a nearly 30-year veteran, feared for his safety. That officer is now on leave and being investigated by an outside agency.
Yeah, 911's been called. Oh my. Holy shit. I don't even know if I'm far enough away from this.
That's a Facebook video shot last month by a guy named Sean Graham. He's driving down the highway as black smoke is billowing into the sky. A BNSF oil train had just derailed and caught on fire on its way to a refinery in Ferndale. Hours earlier, this mile-long train was rattling its way up through Seattle. KUOW's John Ryan has a 2-part story looking into the response and the investigation into a cause of last month's derailment. Hey, John.
Hey, Trish.
John, tell me about the oil train that caught fire.
It was carrying about 3 million gallons of a crude oil known as Bakken crude. It comes from North Dakota. And this oil trains are really big. It's not like a little Amtrak or Sounder train. This one was more than a mile long, 6,500 feet. And one expert called it like a giant slinky. As it goes around the curves, it kind of compresses and expands a little bit, clanks around, and you hear the noises as they go by. And this one had 108 cars, stretching a mile or more. And it was on its way to the refinery in Ferndale, the Phillips 66 refinery. It's one of the 5 refineries we have here on the shores of Puget Sound.
Is this a common train that would run through the area? How many times a week, if I was at Golden Gardens, would I see a train like this?
Probably a couple times a day. About a third of all the oil that we use or produce here in Washington State comes by train. Oil is the most important energy source for the Washington State economy, and the oil gets here from other states. So it comes by trains, by ships. But however it gets here, things can go wrong and you can have a spill. And even when things go perfectly, you have that spill of sorts into the atmosphere of carbon dioxide that's heating up our climate. So transporting oil safely is important. The state also has a legal mandate to reduce its carbon dioxide pollution and be using and transporting less oil altogether.
Let's zoom out from the crash a little bit. Trace its path for me. Start where it started from, though.
So, this train started in the Bakken oil fields of North Dakota, a major source of oil in recent years. And it heads west across North Dakota, crossing Montana, the Idaho Panhandle, and then comes through kind of a really curvy route through Washington State, starting through Spokane, heading down towards the Tri-Cities, then all the way down to the Oregon border and the Columbia Gorge, and then turns north up the shores of Puget Sound, past Tacoma, underneath downtown Seattle, up through Everett, Skagit Valley, and then up to the Whatcom County area where it eventually caught fire. Passenger trains, Amtrak has a train that goes straight across, but oil trains are so heavy they can't go over the mountain pass at Stevens Pass, so they wind all the way down the Columbia River along the Washington-Oregon border through the Columbia River Gorge, and then they head up north, past all the population centers at Puget Sound to go up to the refineries.
Okay, so on the day this happened, this train travels through Seattle at some point and ends up in Custer. And what happens there?
Yeah, so the train had made this long journey all the way from North Dakota, and like trains often have to, they had to stop because there was another freight train ahead. So they stopped, and the crew, they hit their 12-hour limits. They basically went home, and then for about 2 hours almost, the train's sitting there empty on the tracks just south of the town of Custer. And a new crew comes on, and shortly after they've gotten the train rolling forward again, there's a sharp jolt, and then another sharp jolt just a second or two afterwards, and two crew in the front locomotive nearly fall out of their seats. What had jolted them was that, as they learned a little bit later, is that 10 cars in the middle of this train, which is a mile long, but in the middle of this mile-long train, 10 cars had derailed, and very quickly, some of them burst into flame. Up in the front locomotive, the conductor quickly called out on his radio, "Emergency, emergency, emergency." And there's a third crew member. He was actually not on the train at the moment. He had gone ahead in a van they have to go up to the refinery and make sure the gates are open and everything was, ship shape for the train full of oil to arrive without having to stop on the tracks on the way down. And he heard the emergency call, and he rushes back in the van, and they realize they've got a big fire on their hands, black smoke billowing up above the town of Custer. The brakeman goes back to the locomotive, and he picks up the two crewmen, and they head back to the fire because they know they've got to separate the cars that are on fire from the rest of the train that's not on fire, because it can just be a matter of seconds. Sometimes if one of these tanker cars heats up, it can also burst into flame too, like a chain reaction. So, people in town made 911 calls as soon as they saw this huge black plume of smoke right in town. And police got there within just a few minutes, and firefighters, and they knew that they had to evacuate at least some area. They took them a while to figure out what exactly was on this train, what kind of train was it. But it took a while to get that information. So, yeah, then they realized we need to evacuate much of this town within a half mile of this fire. And also where we just set up our emergency command, incident command post in the parking lot of Tony's Tavern, this little watering hole just about 100 yards away. That's too close. So it was kind of a danger to a large chunk of this small town.
The potential, John, here for catastrophe was super, super close. It sounds like this could have gone sideways and been a devastating accident.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I mean, oil trains have had very catastrophic accidents in the recent past. There was one in Quebec in a town called Lac Mégantic. 47 people died. There was a big accident in the Columbia River Gorge just a few years ago. Nobody died, but there was a big spill. That town had to be evacuated as well. So it's, critics of these oil trains call them bomb trains because they do have the potential to catch fire and even explode. And there's been a long-standing concern or debate over how safe these are and what needs to be done to make the transportation of oil safe enough for us to want to keep doing it.
Right, which is what I want to talk about now, because there was a series of things that went according to plan here that prevented this terrible disaster. And some of it was luck, right, that they got everybody out safely, but some of it was the training. Yeah,
there's been lots of emergency planning, emergency prep for a disaster like this. There had been a big worst-case scenario test right in Custer just a few weeks before. So it certainly was a disaster, and lots of toxic smoke, oil spilled on the ground, a few football fields of dirt had to be removed and just thrown to a hazardous waste landfill. There was also some luck of, this didn't happen near a shoreline, didn't happen near any salmon streams. The train had just before this passed the Nooksack River, a very important salmon river. It had just gone through Bellingham, earlier gone underneath Seattle. So one official said this is kind of hard to imagine a better place to have an oil train derailed.
Okay, there's an investigation into the crash. What do we know about why this might have happened?
One interesting thing is that this train was going very slowly when it derailed. It was going just 7 miles an hour. This was a very slow train going on a very straight stretch of track. The rail experts I talked with were a little bit befuddled why a train would derail going that slowly in that spot. And trains can derail at any speed, I was told, but usually it's where there's some kind of a switch in the track that might have been put on the wrong setting or something like that. So they were kind of mystified. One intriguing possibility, I guess I'd say, is that we do know that there has been a lot of tampering or sabotage with train tracks in that county, Whatcom County, and then Skagit County just to the south in the past year. And 2 women were arrested and charged for tampering with tracks in November. Apparently, they've been doing this to protest the construction of a natural gas pipeline up in British Columbia, up in Canada, through some indigenous territory. We don't think that's what happened here. If sabotage did play a role here and the FBI is investigating that, then it appears to be some more damaging kind of tampering.
When might we know more?
Probably months down the road, and based on past investigations of rail accidents. I'm not holding my breath to see those official answers anytime soon, but I am reporting on this, hoping to dig up information.
KUOW environment reporter John Ryan's 2-part investigation is on KUOW.org. Be sure and check it out. John, good to talk to you.
You too, Trish. Thanks a lot.
Seattle Now is produced by Clare McGrane, Caroline Chamberlain Gomez, and Jason Pagano. Matt Jorgensen does our music. I'm Patricia Murphy. See you tomorrow.